I figured out that I thought I was not writing because I was depressed. Turned out that I was depressed because I wasn't writing. And I don't think that means that anybody who has depression, all you need to do is write. I think that at least some depression, a part of it is denying a central part of your identity, maybe for good reasons. In my case, it was because my disabled daughter had such great needs for caregiving that, that's the writing thing. Nobody's going to care if I don't write. I can put that aside to take care of her. In the long run, it wasn't doing her a service.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectors, and welcome to episode 473 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Today's episode, I have an interview with Donn King. Donn King is an author and a speaker who spent years helping writers and speakers connect with audiences in authentic ways. His books and podcast, The Alignment Show, explore how to live in courageous alignment with your values. He blends a warm, slightly playful style while still grounding his work in credibility, and Donn's goal is to prove that words, when used with honesty, heart, and craft, can shift lives. It's always such a fantastic time talking to Donn, and I'm so glad he's come back on the podcast to chat with me. And we talk about a new book that Donn has recently released, as well as the impact of both the 20 years of long-term ongoing caregiving for his daughter Hanna and her recent loss, and some of the changes that have happened in his life since then. We talk about that and so much more. And it's a fantastic conversation, and it's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor. Hey there, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre with a quick question for you. What are you doing November 10th through 14th, 2026? Because if you write books, or if you want to, I'd love to see you in Las Vegas at AuthorNation. I'm speaking there, and I'm going to be hanging out, so just come on up and say hi. AuthorNation, the world's largest indie conference, is an annual gathering where authors come together to support one another, collaborate, and push the craft and business of writing forward. It's not a stuffy conference. It's a room full of people who get it. All of it. The grind, the sweat, the frustration, the goals of getting your story into the hands of the right readers. Whether you're just starting out or you're already running your own publishing business, AuthorNation has it for you. Check it out at AuthorNation.live, and I'll see you in Vegas. All right, comments from recent episodes for episode 472. Going all in on Substack with Orna Ross, Edwin Downward said, "The thing I got out of this episode is where you talk about how all our marketing efforts are really about telling a story that will make our readers sit up and take notice, rather than keep yelling, 'Buy my books!' into the void. Our stories still need to be seen by the right people, but when they are, the upside is so much stronger than the other methods out there. It's a talent I'm still struggling to get right. Not perfect, just moving in the right direction." Thanks for that, Edwin. I'm so glad you pulled that out as a reflection from this conversation, but it really, truly is leveraging your power as a storyteller and compelling people to enjoy your stories, and that can lead to your books. It's a more indirect way of doing it, but it's the thing I'm most comfortable with, because nobody really wants to hear me yell, "Buy my book," in their face. I'm tired of that. But sharing the excitement about the story behind the story, or whatever it is that, impassions you as a storyteller, can potentially impassion others. I remember talking to someone I was really close to back in my university days, and I remember her being inspired and felt a kinship to somebody who was really passionate about something. And I remember this was someone who was a love interest, and I learned that the more passionate I was about my writing, the more intrigued she was about me as a person. And I think about that sometimes, because it's that, again, that passion for storytelling, not for selling, that can draw people. Okay, so I'm reflecting long on this, but I really appreciate that, Edwin. Edwin also says in another comment, in a related topic, I've participated in multiple Smashwords and Kobo promos, but so far my best efforts have failed to get my books out of the page 20-ish dungeon and high enough in the ranking to actually be found by potential readers. And what Edwin's talking about there is, when you're in a bulk promo like that, they often take 200 or 300 titles. And obviously not every title can be on the top page. So sometimes you're on the last page of the promo, like, what he calls the page 20th dungeon. Edwin goes on to say, you've addressed this issue when talking about these promos in the past, but there is a point where it begins to feel like the effort is being wasted. I don't know how to deal with it. So Edwin, this is potentially for you and for anyone else who's participating in these promos, is these promos are often not enough on their own. They need to be backed up with additional things that you do. Your own newsletter, author newsletter, is important to do, of course, but also the booking promos, like with through Crave Books or Written Word Media, sometimes in conjunction with it. And this is something I'll use particularly with Kobo, because I know it works well on Kobo, is getting the title higher up in that placement on Kobo, because, and again, I'm not sure if this is going to help the same way with Smashwords, because the way the titles are displayed on Smashwords in a lot of cases can be completely random. So you go to a page and the book is on page 20, someone else goes to the page and maybe you're on page 6, and then you go again, and sometimes it's just the first book in the series. So Smashwords tends to be more randomly generated. That's a default way that they do these promotions, which is great, meaning everyone sees something different, so it's not the same books getting stuff all the time. But I know that by default on Kobo, and it still seems to work this way from my experiments, is it's based on the book's overall ranking and temperature. So basically how well it's already doing. So if it's already doing well, it floats to the top. Cream goes to the top, kind of thing. So what I do with those promos is, if it's a 99-cent promo and I'm in a Kobo promo that's promoting stuff that's $4.99 and under or whatever, I'll try to run, if I can, whatever, even if it's a small promo, I can run a promo and the day before or the day of that I know that is launching. It's like it's a weekend promo or a week-long promo. I'll run a promo from Written Word Media that drives people, obviously not just to Kobo, but it'll drive it to all the retailers. And even if I can just get a handful of sales or a handful of downloads or whatever, I know that's going to help move my book from page 20 to page 19, 18, etc. And that sometimes helps with the movement. So that's something you may want to try. I am going to talk later in my personal update about a promo I'm just running right now, and the impact it's even had on Kobo. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how my Kobo promo that I paid Kobo directly for was nowhere near as good. Or was it? I'm trying to remember. I'll have to look at the numbers. I don't think it was as good as this third-party promo I did. So anyways, enough about that. But thank you, Edwin, for those reflections. I hope that helps with your future Smashwords and Kobo promos. But the key thing is don't stop doing them, because for the most part, they're free. They don't cost you anything. And you never know when this is the time that the right reader, like you said in your other comment, that the right people see your stories. So don't give up on that. And now a comment on my YouTube video that I shared a few weeks ago, publishing wide but shallow. No, so not. I did that as a previous episode too, but the similar content is Franklin says, this was interesting. As a reader, I've only ever used Amazon, so I didn't know all of this about the other platforms. And thank you for that comment, Franklin. And that's why I will often repeat some things that I've shared about promotions about the other platforms, about how Kobo works, how Smashwords works, how Apple and Barnes & Noble work, stuff like that, because I want to help people understand that they're not always the same way that Amazon works. And there'll be more about that a little bit in my personal update as well. So, without further ado, let's roll a bumper. Let's get into that personal update, shall we? Okay, so for personal update, I alluded to this in comments, but I ran a recent promo on A Canadian Werewolf in New York. So A Canadian Werewolf in New York is book 1 in a series that's currently 8 books. It's urban fantasy, humorous urban fantasy, and book 9 is coming out in November. And I know that free first in series works. I've seen it repeatedly over the years in studies I did when I worked at Kobo. I know that it really works as a great funnel of getting people into a series, but I just been scared to do it. So I finally did it. I made A Canadian Werewolf in New York, a full novel, about 80,000 words or so, free. And I started that in April 1st. No fooling. April 1st, I started it. And I did it in April because I wanted it to be free in terms of a promo that Bookshop was doing through Draft to Digital to spotlight indie authors for indie bookstores for Independent Bookstore Day. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to make it free. Let's do some stuff. I'm doing this promo with Bookshop. And I thought, okay, let me do a promo on Kobo with a free. Pay the $10 to get into that carousel for spotlight of free titles. And I also booked a free Booksy Limelight email. So it's not just a free Booksy email spotlight, but it's a specific single soul email. It costs $495 US. That goes out, and that went out May 7th, which was yesterday, is when I'm recording this. And so I want to dig into some of the effects of the promos. So the Kobo promo was one of those best sort of things that happen on Kobo, where I don't really get a lot of movement, and Kobo's really hard to measure because the Kobo Plus reports. I mean, I love Kobo to death, but the Kobo Plus reports suck because you get them like almost 3 weeks after the end of a month. You don't really see what the Kobo Plus numbers are, so it's really difficult to measure. I mean, it's great, and most of my action's been on Kobo Plus, but it's really frustrating to see what's happening there. And again, I'm not even sure how Kobo Plus works for a book that's already free. I'm trying to figure the math out, and I don't want to go look at the terms and stuff because, why would an author go and understand and read the terms when they can just speculate and make crap up and believe that? But anyways, that Kobo promo did actually quite well. So from April 20th to the 26th, I had it in the promo, and I had 76 downloads in that time period. And this, again, is a book that's maybe since I made it free was only getting maybe 1 or 2 every few days, not a lot, but 76 in that 1 week period, which is a great boost. And then the halo effect, I'm not talking about the halo effect of people buying other books in the series because I haven't really seen a lot of action, but I do know from Kobo studies I did that even up to 6 weeks later, a very small percentage of people who downloaded this book are gonna even read it in the first 6 weeks. So if 76 people downloaded it, maybe one person read it. Right, and then there's a 50% chance that person's going to go and buy something. So my conversion to sales isn't going to be that big because it's smaller. But the halo effect of downloads on that book that continued, it got up to 144 units. So again, maybe that's 2 people who actually started to read the book now, and that could turn into sales on Kobo. So on Bookshop on that 1-day weekend, so the weekend of, I guess, the 26th, whatever, the April 25th, 26th, whatever, that weekend, the halo effect, not the halo effect, that weekend on Bookshop, it was about 91 units. So again, where I haven't really seen any love at all because it's a newer platform, and this is a great opportunity to just get people to read. Now again, if I'm selling print books on Bookshop, I have no clue because they get reported through Ingram that, you sold the book in the US. I'm not going to tell you where it sold, just that it sold somewhere. So I have no idea how my print books have done on Bookshop, but at least I can see, through Draft to Digital, how they've done in ebook format. So that was kind of a good thing to maybe get some love there. And then on with this promo that just ran on May 7th, free Booksy. So not even 24 hours, because I think it went out at 3 p.m. Eastern, and it's still the morning as I'm recording this. So on Amazon, I saw about 1,500 units in less than 24 hours move. And enough volume moved so quickly. And again, it was kind of already ticking along nicely on Amazon before any promos. But it hit number one in 3 categories, and 72 overall. So in the top 100 overall for free title downloads in Amazon. So I'm pretty impressed. And it's kind of funny. It was slowly growing, right? It's still growing. And so that's good. And again, that's not a lot. So, a small percentage, like was it 1.4%, are gonna read the book in the first whatever. So hopefully that 1.4% can lead to people buying the rest of the series. But that's just to give you an idea of the promo. And yes, this free Booksy Limelight email cost me $500 and I know it's going to be a while before it pays back, but I'm going to hit hard on pushing this first book to see where that goes. In other recent news, I don't think I shared this, but I had a chat with Herman on the Pint and Portal author podcast, and it was a conversation about publishing wide and looking beyond Amazon and stuff like that. It was a really fantastic conversation, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. It'll be a link to the YouTube, etc. And that was such a fun conversation. But so Herman, I was reminded, because when I first talked to Herman about the series, is after we did the interview, I went on Kobo, because that's where I do most of my reading, and I started reading Herman Sternagel's The Bartender Between Worlds. It's like a cozy fantasy series, and it involves portals, and it involves bartending, and it's really fun. I'm actually quite loving it. Such a great story. I'm almost at the end of The Bartender Between Worlds, and I'm looking forward to jumping into the next one. But it's so much fun. I do have to highly recommend it. I'm probably going to include that in my email newsletter. It's like, for anyone who's read my Canadian Werewolf series, urban fantasy. Now this is fantasy, like in a fantasy world, but with the portals, you're moving from world to world to world. So magic is, witches and things like that are part of it. But such a great story, and I think if people enjoyed my urban fantasy, they're probably inclined to want to check this out. So I think that would be a good one for me to share. Again, in my newsletter, not telling people to go buy my books, but just say, hey, and if you're in Kobo Plus, you can listen to the audiobook or read the book, and it doesn't really cost you anything. Go ask for it at your library, that kind of stuff, because I know he's publishing it wide. So just helping people find cool things to read, right? Because it's not just about me and buy my books. And then the last personal update thing I want to share is I'm going to be going to TriCon, a sci-fi fantasy horror conference in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I have not been to Halifax since before the pandemic. I love Eastern Canada. Come on, I love all of Canada, but I do love Eastern Canada. I was in Eastern Canada, didn't make it all the way to Nova Scotia, but made it to New Brunswick and spent a lot of time there, about 10 days, traveling around with my good buddy Steve. And we drove together, and because I was there to speak at the New Brunswick Writers Conference. But this year, I saw TriCon's happening. I want to go check it out. It looks really amazing, and I get to be in Halifax. Yay! Ironically, it looks like it's at a hotel I stayed at when I was there for a conference with the university store group when I was managing a university bookstore. And I did a signing at a Chapters when I was in town there the night of a hurricane. Encountered a barista at Starbucks who came over to buy my, I guess Haunted Hamilton was out. Was Haunted Hamilton out? Or was it just One Hand Screaming, the very first version of it? So this goes way back, a long time ago. But anyways, yeah, One Hand Screaming is what I was selling there, my self-published book. But I had made it fully returnable, so it was available. Anyways, I was signing that, maybe Tesseract 16 had come out by then, traditionally published book that I edited. But she had given me a great idea for a really cool town that was not too far away, that had a woman who had created this army of scarecrows. And that night, after having a wonderful conversation with her, I went back to my hotel room and drove through a hurricane to get back to my hotel room, and I wrote till about 2 a.m. And then I got up early, even though the power was out. I still had power on my laptop, and I finished the story, the first draft of what became a 10,000-word story, A Murder of Scarecrows, which I love, and I wrote a sequel to a couple years ago, and it got published in an anthology of cryptids as well, which I thought was kind of cool. But in any way, we're going to be staying at that same hotel. Steve and I are going to be there. So this conference looks really fun, TriCon. So on Friday, here's just a bit of my schedule. On Friday, May 15th at 4 p.m., I'm going to be hosting or moderating a symposium, collective power in self-publishing. And this is going to be more like a town hall discussion than a presentation, where everyone there can participate. And this is like an uncon. I remember doing that with BookNet Canada back in the early days when ebooks were still brand spanking new, talking about what's going on in publishing. But anyway, so this town hall discussion is going to tackle how indie publishing can and has established our own systems and networks, and what's the leverage needed for indies to compete on equal footing with traditional publishing. Can the indie world, just like the traditional publishing world, develop a standard of rights and protections? And I know that there are, places like the Alliance of Independent Authors, etc., that assist with that. But how can indie authors move towards autonomous collective organization without competition, dependency on corporate platforms, and without simply recreating the traditional publishing model? That's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. I'm so looking forward to the conversation we're going to have there. I'm actually going to see if that's something I might be able to record to share via this podcast. I'm going to check with the organizers on that first, but I think that might be a fun one. Again, just to spotlight how cool and how awesome TriCon is. See, I'm not even there, but I'm just so excited about it. On Saturday, May 16th at 8 a.m., which means I can't stay up too late on Friday, at 8 a.m., this again at the West of Nova Scotia, I'm going to be on a panel. I'm moderating a panel with Vanessa Ricci-Thode, who's also from the Kitchener-Waterloo area, Nicole Northwood, Ashaya Ufara, I should say. And we're going to be doing social media presence, audience building, and self-promotion. So this is going to be about building a brand, why it's important in today's literary landscape, especially in the indie market. And we're going to talk about how to optimize your visibility, set boundaries with your curated audience, and what outsourcing looks like as well. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. And then on Sunday, May 17th at 12:30 p.m., I'm going to be on a panel discussing writing a cult in the digital age. What does writing the occult in the 21st century look like across the speculative genre? So that's going to be a really fun conversation as well. I'm so looking forward to checking out this conference, and again, the road trip with my buddy Steve, which means I'm probably going to have to pre-record next week's episode so I can get it scheduled and ready to go, because I'm going to be hitting the road on Monday. It's going to be a long time, so it's going to be interesting, because I'm still going to try to get up early and get some stuff done while Steve's still sleeping without making too much room. It's kind of like when Liz and I travel, is me getting up early and trying to make as little noise as possible, get a coffee, and work. I know at one of the hotels, for example, I could get up, I can go into this other place that has free coffee, and I can sit there and not disturb Steve. At least that's the one hotel I know we're going to be at as well. But in any case, the personal update, that is it. I've babbled on long enough. Why don't I stop this, and I'm going to roll into this fantastic conversation with Donn King as we talk about creativity and devotionals for caregivers who don't need another inspirational slogan. And again, that great chat with Donn King is coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Donn, welcome back to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's so great to be back with you again. I love coming on and talking with you.
It's always great chatting with you. And I was going to say it's been a long time since I've had you on the podcast, but it hasn't been so long that we had a conversation, because we did have a conversation just a couple months ago. But I thought it would be better to do a more updated version of that. So for guests who are familiar with Donn, Donn's been on the show before. I'll have a link to our previous episode. I think it was the way of the 3-year-old why we were talking about like years ago, several years
Probably
ago.
so. Probably so. Yeah.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking a little bit more about caregiving. Yeah, I mean, you've got a new book that's going to be out by the time this episode airs, but let's give my readers a little bit of a background on who is Donn King?
Well, Mark, I've spent a lifetime trying to figure that one out. So, if I had to simplify it, I think it makes me think of a book I read years ago. I believe the title of it was Life 101, and it was differentiating between goals and mission and that sort of thing. So, goals are set looking forward, mission is discovered, and very often it's a matter of looking back. And so, as you asked that, who is Donn King? I have
Yeah,
always been a writer of some sort.
right,
And just before we started recording, I was talking about my body is reminding me that I have a need to cut back on things.
right.
The one thing that's going to stay there is the writing part of it.
It has to,
So,
right?
yeah, yeah,
It's who you
absolutely.
are. Yeah,
And it even figures into the latest couple of books here. The short version is that I went through about a decade when I couldn't write, and it wasn't writer's block. I know how to overcome that. I started working at a newspaper when I was 14 years old. And, I learned early, you cannot say, I just don't feel the muse today because there's an editor hanging over your shoulder going, great, but 3 o'clock's the deadline,
yeah,
And so I knew how to overcome writer's block, but this was like the well had gone dry.
yeah,
And there's a lot of parts of my life that I recognize that ship has sailed.
yeah,
I don't know if it looks like for folks who see this on video. I turned 70 this year, and because of the caregiving stuff, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, I've worn away like an old pencil. I used to hike all over the Smoky Mountains, which we're fortunate enough to live in the foothills of.
right.
I have trouble walking across the parking lot now, and so
Yeah,
that part of life is just, that ship has sailed.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I thought that was the case with writing. The shorter version is I figured out that I thought I was not writing because I was depressed. Turned out that I was depressed because I wasn't writing. And I don't think that means that anybody who has depression, all you need to do is write. I think that at least some depression, a part of it is denying a central part of your identity, maybe for good reasons. In my case, it was because my disabled daughter had such great needs for caregiving that, that's the writing thing. Nobody's going to care if I don't write. I can put that aside to take care of her. In the long run, it wasn't doing her a service. And so that kind of gets into, the believe it or not, the short version of who is Donn King, at least today.
yeah. Well, I was going to say something that because when I think about the various roles that you've played academically and in the creative world, yeah, you've got the podcast, right? You've got the Alignment Show podcast, but you're also a professor as well. I would say that even when you weren't writing, is it fair to say you were always a storyteller?
I think so. And that's one way that I've, in a way, comforted myself, I guess. It wasn't always about putting words on the page. I had a building career as a professional speaker just about the time, Hanna was born.
Right,
And after her issues came up, I realized I couldn't be dependable as a speaker. It wasn't fair to schedule with somebody 6 months or a year ahead of time.
right.
And then at the last minute have to say, I'm sorry, I can't be there. My daughter's in the hospital. So, turned back to writing. And for clarity, I retired from the professor thing about a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
So that comes into the writing actually because I've got a good retirement income.
right.
I don't have to worry about the writing enabling me to sleep indoors,
Yeah.
you know, and that frees me up to explore
Oh, yeah,
things.
of course.
Um, so it all works together. But yeah, there's always been the storytelling aspect. It's just
Right.
makes me think. I know you're a member of CAPS, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. I was a member of National Speakers Association some years ago. I used to hear through them, don't think of yourself as a speaker or a writer. Think of yourself as an expert in, whatever area. And you use writing and speaking and courses and just all the channels for getting that expertise shared with the world, a world that needs it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. Now, speaking of like one of the books we talked about and one of the topics we talked about a few months ago, probably potentially so caring or creativity while caring,
Yes.
caregiving for someone else, because for the longest time, even as a writer, you had the work, the academic work, but you also had an additional role where you were not, obviously you couldn't go on the road and do a lot of speaking and things like that. Very regimented schedule because you were caregiving for an adult child. Let's dig into that creativity while caring because that was such a significant part of your life for the longest time. And I still think, I mean, even though things have changed recently, I that's probably still a part of you and what you do. I mean, it's not
Well,
something that goes away, right?
absolutely. The expression of it, so to speak, has changed. And just to kind of lay out the factual underpinning there, our severely disabled daughter, Hannah, died in mid-December. I can't remember when we talked in the last recording. I think probably October, because I think
Yeah,
that's when
Hannah had
creating,
just been moved into a facility
yeah,
that'll. So it was just prior, actually, just prior to Hannah passing away that we spoke last time, I believe. And
I
now
think I think
that
so.
in the passage of time, I was like, wow, was that October? Like we talked. I
Well,
mean,
and
like
so,
half a year later, we're speaking again.
here we are, yeah. Part of my ADHD is time blindness, and so I can reconstruct stuff. I know because I read it on reports that
Hmm.
Creating While Caring was published in October.
Yeah.
And so I think we talked when that book was coming out.
Right.
Hannah, quick background, she had a severely, I'm not saying that clearly, she had a very rare chromosomal disorder, trisomy 14 mosaic partial. For context, Down syndrome is trisomy 21. Okay, that's the medical name for it. And without going into what all it means, there's only 15 or 20 like her known in the world at any given time.
Right.
Probably more in some third world countries where genetic testing might not be available. It would just get labeled as cerebral palsy,
Right.
but very rare. And it led to neurological impact where she could do nothing volitionally. She didn't even close her epiglottis when she swallowed. So she required constant attention to make sure she didn't drown in her own saliva. She had 24-hour nursing qualified, um, but there is a nursing shortage in this country. And don't get me started on the medical system. That's a whole other discussion. So, bottom line, 168 hours in a week. There were a lot of weeks I cared for her over 100 hours a week on top of the academic career. My college was very understanding. They let me teach online long before online teaching became,
Right.
what it is today. So that's how I was able to manage all of that. And part of where the creating while caring came in, not just the story I told a little while ago about realizing for me that I was depressed because I wasn't writing. There's a pernicious sort of perfectionism that came into it. And I've never been a perfectionist in the way most of us think of it. I understood that you can spend, get to 90%, you can spend double the effort that it took you to get there and still not complete that other 10%. And it really doesn't make that much difference to the reader. So I never fell into that. The kind of perfectionism, though, that hit me was I always preferred, this is the way I put it now. I used to think this is the way I had to do it. I preferred 2 and 3 hours of uninterrupted time for my writing in order to be able to focus. The
Right.
ADHD thing again, you see.
Yep.
And when I couldn't do that, I thought, well, that means I can't write. So when I figured out I really needed to be writing in order to honor my needs, okay, that means I got to figure out a different way to do it. And so I learned to write in 5 and 10 minute segments. I learned dictation. I learned to do it sitting in a doctor's waiting room, even if other people in the waiting room were looking at me weird and going, "What is that guy doing?" You know,
Yeah.
just a different way of doing it. And so separating the methodology from the outcome, and that was part of what came into creating while caring. So that book came about because I realized there are a lot of other people in that situation. In this country alone, there are 50 million unpaid caregivers.
Wow.
And of course, they're not all writers and artists and sculptors and actors, and
Yeah.
but there's a lot of them that are.
Yeah.
Plus, a lot of people who don't think of themselves as creative are creative. Plumbers are creative because they're constantly solving problems that the textbook doesn't fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, how do you honor that? To me, a basic human need to create. I think that's what makes us human. So, there's not a lot of specific methodology in the book. It's not just a mindset thing, but it is recognizing that as humans, we need to create. We have these responsibilities. It's not a matter of either or. You can figure out how to serve your person by taking care of yourself. And of course, one of the things about caregiving, when you have a crisis, I'm along with everything else I do, I pastor a church, and we have one of our members who is in hospice. We're probably going to lose him this week. His family, of course, is dealing with challenges. Not to minimize any of those challenges, but they have an end point. When you are a caregiver, it is like being in constant crisis and there is no indication of when it will end. In fact, you don't want it to end,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. And yet, it's ongoing. So when Hannah died, we grieved, and I am obviously still grieving, but it's a different sort of grief because in a way we've been grieving for over 20 years.
Right. Yeah.
Every time there would be one of those milestones, while other parents were celebrating first steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hannah
Of
wasn't
course.
doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
First grade, prom, first date, graduating high school. It happens that she died at age 22. That's the age that normal situation, your child will be graduating college.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's been grieving all along, and a
Yeah.
recognition of the loss. But there's also been there's joy seems like a weird word to put to it, but we always tell people she has been our greatest teacher. Like
Right.
she has taught us to make your plans, but hold them lightly because they're going to change.
Yeah. What was it? Men plan, God laughs. Is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah something like that? Yeah.
Something along those lines. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just I don't know if it's good theology or not, but I do imagine very often. Um, I guess some people will consider this heresy, but I just imagine him and Michael up there watching, saying, "Okay, uh, the Moses Ten Commandments, all that. Okay, they're getting to the part about circumcision. Oh,
Yeah.
circumcision. Okay, watch,
Yeah.
watch,
Yeah.
watch. Okay, oh, they're doing it. Okay, here's $5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing is, as a pastor, not a lot of people would expect. It's like, oh, you have a sense of humor about religion. You have a sense of humor about
Yeah.
scripture as well, because we can't help but apply our humanity to those texts, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we mentioned a couple of times another book that is on the cusp of coming out, which it's a book of devotionals for
Yeah.
caregivers. And one of the things that I'm finding that is kind of odd about writing such a book, one of the first things typically that readers will do is try to figure out the theological stance of the person who wrote it.
Right. Yeah.
And that wasn't what I was trying to do with this. It is supposed to be support for caregivers.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I if I weren't Christian, I'd probably be Buddhist. I've gotten a lot of support from non-dual systems and all that sort of thing. Without getting into a whole lot of theological stuff here, I've always considered that whatever religion humans are doing, it's like we used to have a dog and two cats in our house. And this was when I was teaching, so I'd be running around in the morning trying to get ready to get to work, gulping coffee, grabbing the briefcase, running out to the car, running back in because I forgot something. And the dog is just sitting there watching me. And she's trying to figure out what is he doing? Why doesn't he just lay down and lick himself where dogs
Yeah,
are
lick himself and enjoy the sun.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there is absolutely no way that dog could understand the concept of clocking in. And there's no way that I could explain it to her, you know. And so the book of Job, some scholars think the book of Job is the oldest book in the Bible in terms of when it was written.
Right.
And if so, then as long as people have been writing about stuff like that, they've wrestled with that question about why do bad things happen to good people. The last 5 chapters of that book, in essence, is God saying, you can't understand this. And Job never does get an explanation.
Right.
Okay. So,
We're
a
just the
little theory.
dog laying there licking ourselves, wondering why
Yeah,
this guy's
exactly.
rushing around like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And, get a little theological here. It has been my approach that when God could not explain it to us, then he came here and lived as one of us. But that's a whole other thing, okay? Just that initial the dog thing. Now, I used to describe this as dog and cat theology, and people would say, well, where's the cat come into it?
Yeah. Where
Well,
does the cat come into it?
when I traveled for work and I'd be away for a couple of weeks, I'd come home. If I left for 5 minutes and came back, the dog would be like, he's back, he's back, he's, 2 weeks, the cat's like, hey, did you bring the can opener?
Yeah.
For most people, that's really where the religion thing comes in. It's like Santa Claus, it's just I need it when I need it, and
Yeah.
I don't really even try to understand it. So that's a whole other thing. So those of us who wrestle with it, I think in terms of the dog theology, which is why I never get into judging somebody else. Do they agree with me? Have they got their theology right or whatever? So all of that is context to say when I wrote the devotional book, it was just about support and avoiding trope isn't the right word because as writers we kind of value tropes, but the
Yeah.
stereotypical things that people will say, like, when Hannah died, they're trying to be supportive and kind, and they'll say things like, well, at least she's not hurting anymore. And I mean, that doesn't help.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so those of us who are caregivers, we hear those kind of things. And I did not want to be trotting out the same old stereotypical responses to
Yeah.
suffering or whatever. So it's a different approach. It is based in what I would call Orthodox Christian approach, but I think it's useful for anybody. I think all of us are religious in some way. It may be that our religion is transpersonal psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
We draw as I listen to you and your podcast, you were very good at drawing people together on the basis of our common humanity.
Right. Yeah.
That's not religion, that's spirituality.
Yeah.
But it's what I'm.
Yeah.
I tried to write the book so that it would be addressing that universal
Right.
spiritual need that we all have when we face things like, why the hell is this happening to me?
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things for the book you had mentioned is I wrote it for caregivers who don't need another inspirational slogan. That's not going to help me, right? You wanted it to be grounded in like reality or grounded in actual useful resources rather than like, the pat on the head kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I think what a lot of caregivers in particular face is we feel so alone. When I say 50 million, U.S. right now population roughly 400 million.
Yeah.
That's a huge percentage, but we don't know about those people because we don't run into them at the grocery store.
Right.
They're at home taking care of their people.
Or they're on shifts, right? Because they're trading shifts with other family members or other loved ones who are taking their turn, yeah, in that role. And again, in a lot of situations, I know for myself, I've only been in a caregiver situation for a very limited time because usually it's on, the deathbed
Hmm.
of a loved one, or do you know what I mean? So I've never had to do like, 20 years. But you're
Yeah.
not just a caregiver, you're also the parent. You're also you're in a relationship with the person, not just a caregiver to them. That
Hmm. Hmm.
creates a whole extra level.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, in this country, a lot of your time is spent in advocacy with bureaucratic institutions that, and I'll say
Yeah.
as a side note here, I ran in those bureaucracies, I often ran into people who were doing what they did as a sort of ministry, who were
Right.
as frustrated with the system as I was.
Yeah.
So just that sense of not being alone. It doesn't
Right.
fix anything,
Yeah.
but it enables you to draw strength from each other. And so I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
important in a human kind of way.
Well, I'm a huge advocate for that, which is why I love what we do as writers is even in our fiction, even when it's not a nonfiction book for caregiver or whatever, you write something and that says to the person who reads it, I see you. You're not alone.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
There
yeah,
are other people who understand you and your situation. It seems like you're alone, but when you see yourself in a character, or you see yourself in a situation, like, oh, okay. It does bring people together, even if they never speak with one another.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as I read, we'll get a little plug in here, Mark. As I read your werewolf stories, yeah, it's about a werewolf, but it's really about the common human experiences that we have. As I look at him and how he wrestles with his relationships,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the impact that his situation has on those relationships. Even, hard science fiction. I just, I'm reading Andy Weir's book that underlies the movie that just came out.
Oh my God. One of the
Project,
best science fiction novels I've read in like
yeah,
20,
yeah,
30 years. Yeah.
Project Hail Mary, and
Yeah.
the movie I thought was well done. Focuses on a little different stuff than what the book does.
Yeah.
Andy is much more concerned at making sure the science is solid.
Yeah.
But when you get right down to it, even within that, it's about what is the experience of being human.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you can see the humanity in the contrast with Rocky,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
and 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 Rocky is human in a different sort of way when
yeah.
you look
It's
at
like,
it.
we could almost go beyond it and say, what is it like to be alive?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because Rocky is obviously not a human. Rocky is an
Yeah,
alien, an alien species that is doesn't not really humanoid in the way we think of aliens, right? Not like on
yeah.
Star Trek where they all walk around, they all seem to be like humans with just like different shaped ears and heads and stuff like that. Uh,
Well, and one thing that, and I haven't finished reading it yet, but one of the things I'm kind of curious about, I know one of the things with Rocky species is that they did not know about relativity and they didn't know about radiation.
yeah,
And what that makes me think about humans, well, what is it that we live in that that affects us deeply and we don't even know it exists?
exactly. Yeah, that's that thing you can't see or understand. Like there's no purpose in trying to explain it to you because it can't be explained to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do love that. I love that dog analogy that you use. I'm going to boil that, my friend. I will
Absolutely.
liberate that into my own.
You are welcome to it. Remember the cat part of it.
Yeah, I will. And I can't help it because I have a dog and two cats.
Yeah.
So this book, this devotionals for caregivers, does it have a title yet?
Yes, it does. And if I hop over here, those of us who are on visually, there we are. Yeah. Anchored for the
Okay,
storm.
Anchored for the Storm. Okay, and
Devotions
that
for,
you said is coming out in April of 2026.
yes, as we record this, probably in about 2 weeks. I am behind on um,
Yeah.
getting it out. I had intended to have it out by April 1st.
Right.
And I
No,
guess
no
that's one of
fooling.
the, yeah, I guess that's one. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, Mark. So, I guess it's one of the advantages of being an independent publisher. I can
You,
adjust my own deadlines if I need to.
you can.
But, it's part of, in a way, going back to the creating while caring and just the whole caregiving thing. You got to give yourself some grace there. Um, before we started recording, I made the comment that I'm realizing there's a lot of stuff has that ship has sailed. There is an apocryphal story that I'm sure you've probably heard that there's no evidence it ever took place, but the conversation was supposedly between Warren Buffett and his chauffeur. Do you know the story I'm talking about off the top of your
I'm
head?
not sure I remember that.
Okay, short version of it here. Chauffeur asked Warren Buffett for advice on being successful in life. And he said, okay, take a legal pad, write down 25 things you want to accomplish in your life. Okay, you know where I'm
I'm
going with this.
remembering this now. Keep going. I love this.
Okay. And so for our listeners who may not have heard it, he said, write down these 25 things. These are things you really want to accomplish, not just that you would like to, you really want to accomplish them. Okay. Now identify the top five. Okay. Now scratch off the other 20. Those are things you want to accomplish. You just have to get used to the idea that if you try to do all 25 of them, you will do none of them. You have to give up things you really want to do in order to achieve your top five. Now, for so long, when we bring it back into the caregiving situation, for so long, when somebody asked me standard question, a lot of situations, what do you want to do? My response was, what difference does it make? Because I just have to do what I have to do. And so since we lost Hanna, I'm considering that question. I'm close to figuring out the 25. I have no clue at this point in my life how to pick those top five. One of the things I wrestle with is I'm aware that in a way, I lost my best earning years. I don't regret it. I made the decisions that I made. I had my values right. I had my priorities right.
Right.
But still, I lost my best earning years, and I don't have that many years left at age 70. That's just the reality. The temptation is to try to do 30 years worth of stuff in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I've just got to decide what am I going to leave off. We may be winding the podcast down, for example.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Not sure. I'm in that space. And I have also learned I have to give myself patience in figuring that kind of thing out.
Yeah.
And so all of that comes back to what we were talking about a little while ago. I'm missing a deadline. Okay. The book, who knows by the time this comes out? There was one of my guests on a podcast last year that she was on the verge of releasing a book. And as you do, we get podcast episodes in the can, and sometimes it's months before they go out. And I realized I hadn't published her episode yet. And so I went to her website to see how things were going. And the book still says pending. Reached out to her, said, do you want me to hold the episode since we haven't done it anyway? Do you want me to hold the episode until the book comes out? She said, no, go ahead and put it out there because at this point, who knows when I'm going to get that book published? You just have to adapt,
I
and
feel that. I feel that. Knowing I was on a podcast in 2006, and I didn't actually publish that book that I was supposed to finish during NaNoWriMo that November in 2006. I didn't finish it till 2015, and I got it published in 2016. It's like 10
yeah,
years
yeah.
later. So I feel her.
Exactly, exactly. So, if I'm 2 weeks behind on getting this thing out, nobody is gonna care or know. And it may be by the time this episode comes out that it may still not be out there. I do have a link which we'll share at some point because I'm using pretty links. And so right now it leads to a form that says, let me know when it's published.
Yeah, that's
And,
great. And then
and then once it
you can change that to the book itself.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's a little insight maybe that a lot of people could use. If you've got a WordPress site, main reason I keep WordPress, quite honestly, is because of that Pretty Links
Yeah.
plugin.
So it's a Pretty Links plugin, and what you do is you have like your name slash whatever the probably anchored is probably what the URL is going to be or something like that. Well, actually,
Something like
give
that.
us
Yeah.
the URL for that right now,
Yeah,
and then we can
and
talk through it.
while we're talking, I'm going to verify that I've got the right one here. So, like for instance, for the last book, DonnKing.com, that's Don with a double N. Who else do we know who does that one?
I don't know anyone who uses a double N in
Yeah.
the podcasting world.
Yeah. So Donn King, DONNKING / creating while caring takes you to that book. And so when it was pre-publication, it went to, basically, um, I'm finding my ability to do two things at once is getting
I hear you.
over.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike. You had exactly what I had set up, DonnKing.com / anchor.
Nice and easy, right?
Yeah, and then when it is published, it will lead to a universal book link. Because I listened to a very wise person just recently. In fact, it was just yesterday because I'm behind on podcast episodes
Yeah.
about wide and shallow.
Oh, publishing wide but shallow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm that pretty link will go to a universal book link, and
Right.
then we'll be. I'm gonna my I'm plugging you a little bit here, and I'm glad to do that. I've realized that the way the 3-year-old why and
Yeah.
medium well, I published direct through Kobo so that I could take advantage of their promotions.
Yeah, yeah.
Guess who has never taken advantage of those promotions?
You've never actually applied for any of them.
No, no.
Well, but
I
again, I mean, to
just,
think about everything you were balancing, just getting the books out was a pretty
yeah,
big deal, right?
and that's true. That's true. So it's one of the things where I have to give myself grace is to recognize I know how to do a proper book launch. I just don't have the capability. In fact, when Creating While Caring came out,
Yeah.
it came out during a week that Hanna was in the ICU
Oh,
in
geez. So you had
October.
planned it and then unexpected.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't even have the capability of pulling it back, to hold it until I could do
Right.
a proper book launch. It just launched.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Again, one of the advantages of independent publishing is we can build on the long tail as opposed to the
Right.
book launch.
Yeah.
So I'm just taking a different approach to it.
Yeah. I like that you've maintained a malleability, I guess, or a
Mhm.
flexibility where you've sort of adapted into that.
Yeah.
And obviously it's the to accept the things I cannot change, right? And
Yeah.
to change the things where I can. That sort of again, not to throw inspirational.
Yeah, but that's one that's very real because we tend
Yeah,
to beat ourselves up over the things we think we should have done. I mean, I still
yeah,
wrestle with that. So, it's like you were just saying, I can't think of it right now. The things that I cannot change, except the things I can't, the wisdom to know the difference,
yeah.
and the grace to myself to quit beating myself up about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's the part we don't often remember to add.
Yeah, yeah.
Man. So we've got these four books. By the time this episode comes out, because chances are, even if you are delayed in getting this out, I'm pretty sure it'll be available by the time I get this episode out the door. But Donn, so
Okay.
for anyone who's listening who
Mhm.
is currently in a caregiving situation, whether it is something that is a long-term care situation or whether it's a temporary, because there's all kinds of caregiving that happens. They're probably feeling alone. They're probably feeling like nobody else understands. What are some things that you would want? And again, whether they're a writer or just a creative person in general, like whether you're religious or spiritual or whatever it is, right? What's something you would want them to hear?
Mhm. Besides the obvious, you are not alone. You can separate your intellectual knowledge of that from your understandable emotional response. Just because you know you're not alone doesn't mean you may not feel alone. Honor the feeling, Don't put it in the driver's seat. One of those bumper sticker things that I learned years ago is don't believe everything you think. Okay, so let that go. Reach out. Find ways for community. When we're tied in with the caregiving thing, one of the wonderful things available to us is the internet. Podcasts, for crying out loud. Let's be honest. I never would have met you if it wasn't for. We've never met in person. I doubt that we ever will be able to. I hope so.
It would be an
I
awesome
had in.
experience. But yeah,
Yeah,
we have not met in person, and yet we feel like we're old friends.
yeah, yeah. I had planned. I had bought the tickets to go to Author Nation last November.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And with Hanna's stuff, it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But see, these connections are still real. Even so, sometimes we talk about our real friends. I don't think the connection, the medium, makes that much difference anymore.
Right.
So I do want to meet in person at some point because I want to see exactly how tall you are. uh,
Not as tall as I used to be. I'm getting shorter every year.
well, that's the truth. That is the truth. There are so many things my dad did not tell me about what happens to men when they get older, but
Yeah.
that's another discussion. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, that we can share those common things
yeah,
too.
exactly.
Like I have to make noises when I get in and out of chairs. That's just a given right now,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. They're the noises I make with my voice, but then there are noises that I didn't know my body made those. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
I come with
anyhow,
sound effects now. That's just how
yeah.
life is.
I'm thinking of auditioning for a cereal commercial. Anyway, what else would we say? You're not alone. Reach out. You do have to be proactive about it.
Yeah.
Um, Help other people to understand that it's perfectly okay for them to talk with you about the challenges that you're having. I used to find that people would hesitate to say anything about Hannah because they were afraid they would make me sad.
Right.
You know, I think about it all the time anyway. Okay,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not
It's not.
gonna.
Yeah. 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 She's not gone. She's always there. Yeah. I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So we don't want to make it the only identifying mark of my life and who I am, but it is a big part of it, and it's perfectly okay to acknowledge it. People will say, "Well, I don't know what to say." When you don't know what to say, it's important to say it anyway.
Yeah. Or
And
even
it
to
is
say,
for,
I'm not sure what to say, but
yeah,
I
there we go.
want
Yeah,
to let you know I'm thinking about you or I'm whatever, right? And that is difficult because we're not really good at conflict. We're not really good at, like if the fear of causing someone else emotion, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's a very good thing to say right there. I'm not sure what to say. I just
Yeah,
want you to
because you're
know I'm
being
glad of that.
honest. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say right now. I wish I did.
Hmm. Yeah.
Is probably better than not saying something.
Yeah, yeah. It is worthwhile, and you can find lots of stuff out on the internet about this. But what do you say to someone who is grieving? You
Yeah.
know, they'll give you just a search like that.
Yeah.
Use your Chat GPT or Claude or whatever it is. Say, here's the situation my friend has. What are some things that I can say that would be supportive?
Yeah.
And it'll give you some good ideas there.
Yeah.
The thing is, a lot of the stereotypical things people say, the way they come across is it's not so much you're trying to support me, you're trying to make yourself feel better. My situation makes you fearful of your own death or your own
Right.
discomfort. You know.
Yeah.
And so for the people around you to be okay being uncomfortable. Now, you can't make that happen, of course, but just realize that you don't help the thing by not talking about it yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And but that seems to be a default position that so many of us fall into is just not knowing what to say. So we're like, well, better not to say anything, and then it's safer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Not
I've
necessarily.
I've I've had to on my side. There are a lot of folks in our community who knew about Hannah and who know what happened, but then there are a lot of folks who don't know the most recent news, so to speak.
Right.
And like we were at a coffee shop the other day, barista we had not seen in a while. And by the way, coffee shops are really close to me. These two books right here are
Coffee
all,
shop. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
based on coffee shops.
Yeah.
And so she had not seen us in a while. We've been zigging when she zagged. And happens that she's in high school, so she doesn't have a lot of life experience,
Yeah.
And so she said, "How's Hannah doing?" And we have thought about, okay, what do we say and so
Yeah.
we've just come up with just very simple to say, well, I'm sad to have to tell you that she passed away in mid-December.
Right.
Just not going into a lot of detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as young as this young person is, she just said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." And so she expressed the honest response. She didn't try to make us feel better. She didn't try to make herself
Right.
feel better. And we just carried on,
Yeah.
you know. And so she talks with my wife a lot. My wife is an inveterate crocheter. She crochets everywhere she goes, including the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so she and the barista talked a little bit about the crocheting and just went on.
Yeah.
That was entirely appropriate. It helped us to feel seen without going into a whole lot of stuff around it, and we didn't have
Yeah.
to go into a lot of explanation about it.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
if people are curious, we're perfectly fine. And a lot of times a follow-up question will be, was this unexpected?
Yeah.
And I can anticipate those kind of questions. And my stock response is, well, in a way, I mean, we have known for 20 years we could lose her at any minute. So it wasn't unexpected in that sense. On the other hand, this was her 40th hospitalization, and we had kind of gotten used to this is just what Hannah does. She goes in the hospital, things like look dire, and she pulls out of it. So it was
Yeah.
unexpected in that sense. Now
Right.
that's 3 sentences,
Yeah.
and so I've got those kind of ready for any time somebody, and I want them to be able to indulge in the right word, but to follow their curiosity.
Yeah.
It's okay for people to ask questions. And I'm also okay with saying, which I've never really had to do, I'm just not comfortable talking about this right now, but I do appreciate your interest. So
Yeah.
have some
Yeah.
stock phrases like that you've thought about ahead of time.
Right.
The
Yeah.
great Robin Williams, the master of improv, what a lot of people don't know is that he would practice for hours at having little one-liners ready.
Yeah.
Like he knew he was going to get his tongue tangled up as fast as his delivery was. And so he would have it ready to say, "Wow, man, why can't you say the words?" And he
Yeah.
just had
Yeah.
that ready.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
love that. Donn, for anyone who's listening to this who cannot get enough of Donn King, can you let my listeners know where they can hear from you, where they can check out your books? Where can they find all things Donn King?
And then thank you. Thank you. We've already talked about a couple of links for specific stuff. You can always find my books by going to donnking.com. That's DONNKING.com/books. Nice and simple.
Yeah.
And I have been doing something for a while that you have started experimenting with, which is Substack. I suspect I'm going to keep doing Substack as one of those few things that survive.
Yeah.
And the easy way to find me on Substack is donnking.com/KC. The
Casey.
letters K and C. That stands for King's Chronicles.
Oh, okay.
So if you can remember kingschronicles.substack.com, that's where
But
donnking.com/KC.
donnking.com/KC, yeah, could get you there.
Points you to that same place.
Right.
Just a little easier to type.
A lot less letters.
Yeah.
Why I write under Mark Leslie.
And by the way, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Lefebvre? Am
Oh,
I
you
getting
got it.
close?
You got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will be honest, I remember the spelling by mispronouncing it in my head. And so I
Well,
want to
that's how
make
you remember the spelling, by actually paying attention to the consonants. If you ignore them, it's how I pronounce. But Donn, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's always great to chat with you.
I enjoy it so much, Mark, and hope if you ever make it to the Great Smoky Mountains, I will say without digging into it here, I completely understand why you don't want to come to this country right now. In fact, I've asked you before, I'll ask again, would you consider adopting me?
Yeah, of course. Always room for you, Donn. Always room for people with hearts like yourself. Of course.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Donn. So a few things to reflect on. The first one is related more to the logistics of this. Donn and I did an interview, and I screwed up and I didn't get it out the door. and then something changed. Because at the time I did that initial interview, Donn had just gotten to the point where they had to put Hanna into a facility with 24-hour care, and that was a bit of a change to what Donn had been used to. And so we talked a little bit about that. But then, a month or so later, Hanna passed away. And when I went back and I listened to the interview, I was like, well, come on, let's be honest. It's an excuse to talk to Donn again. I love his attitude. I love his spirit. He inspires me. And yes, part of it was a personal. I get to chat with Donn again, which is a great value for me, and I know for you. But also, I just felt like I wanted to learn more from some of the stuff he had been going through, and how that maybe made some changes in perspective as well. And I thought it would be able to do Donn and Hanna justice, I think. So there were a few reasons for that, and it was weird. So I'm reflecting on the why I decided to do that, and I think there were multiple reasons, right? Like I said, multiple reasons. Because I'll take an excuse to talk to Donn any day, but also there were other reasons why I thought maybe have this conversation, similar conversation, but a conversation in a new light with him as well. And I guess that's a decision you have to make as a podcaster when you're like, oh, I got this interview and we did this thing and we both invested some time in it and there was benefit just in the conversation. But also, what does it mean to take that work and say, we're going to have to toss it and do it again? It's almost like, taking that first draft and making some changes and going, it was really good, but I need to go in this other direction according to, feedback from my editor or whatever. And we do that in our writing, right? And you're like, but it's lost work. No, it's not lost work. Donn and I both grew as people in the first conversation we had, and again in the second conversation. This goes back to I'd mentioned earlier in an earlier episode about I was being interviewed by a friend for a podcast, and we had a phenomenal conversation. We got to the end of the conversation, went, whoops, it didn't hit the record button. And I said, don't look at this as a waste. We just had a good time together. Let's do this again, and we'll record it next time. So anyways, that's the first reflection is more of the logistics of this conversation. The second reflection is the incredible power of not feeling alone. And if you are somebody who's been involved in long-term care for a loved one, for a friend, family member, child, parent, whatever, and often, with a parent, it can be long-term, right? Because you can be looking after somebody for a long time. I had a friend, who was had a grandparent that they lived with recently pass away, and it was hard. It was a lot of hard work, particularly as their grandparent got more and more ill, and they couldn't really leave without making sure that there was someone there to look after this person, and that can be really exhausting. And so it's a reminder that there's probably somebody listening to this podcast who doesn't feel alone, because Donn shared stories of Hanna and what that was. Now, obviously, with a child, for 22 years, that is a different situation than a parent or a grandparent. But it's still, you understand, like somebody can listen to Donn and go, yeah, I know what you're saying there, and that ultimately is such an incredible power that we have as writers. Yeah, okay, on a nonfiction, I guess this is a nonfiction podcast because it's nonfiction. We're talking about real things. I'm talking with real people about real things. We may talk about fiction, but it's a nonfiction environment. But when you're sharing that, you can say, hey, this is an experience I've had or whatever, and people who listen go, yeah, me too, I understand. Or I understand being a writer. I understand being a creator and having all these responsibilities to juggle. That is something, as you're thinking about the things you write, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, that the things that you write have an incredible power to help other people. And please do not forget that, especially when things are hard, especially when you're like, oh man, if I could just sell one book this month. I know I've been there, and I am there regularly on particular platforms or whatever, where I'm not having much movement, or I am at an event and, like a Sunday in Shockstock, London. Friday was a great, 5 hours or 6 hours that I was there. Saturday was fantastic. Sunday was a dud. Sunday was dead. I barely sold anything that day. And yet I had a fun time with my neighbors, laughing and joking, and made the best of the situation. And I still did sell some books. And here's the other thing. Some of the people who bought some of those books on the Sunday, that was the dead day, where I'm like, oh, I didn't make as much money. Poor me. Did somebody get something of value from one of my books? Did they read, a story from my horror story collection? Did they read one of my nonfiction ghost stories? And that made their day better. We have this power as writers in the things that we share, particularly when we share authentically, and our characters are real, like realistic and based on real emotions and things that and understand about the world. That can be something that you've done for another person, where they pick up the book. They most likely are never going to leave a review or even reach out to you. But know that the words that you write have a power of making sure somebody else doesn't feel alone. So I want to thank you for not giving up when you're writing, because I know that your writing can do that for somebody else out there in the world. The other reflection comes to like what we talked about near the end of the conversation, is what to say when you're not sure what to say. And I love that Donn talked about this. I guess the value in that, because again, you're in situations like, I don't know what to say. I want to help. And do you want to help the person just to help them, or do you want to help the person so you can just feel better about yourself? But there is often, you want to do something kind for that person. And I think one of the kindest things you can do, particularly when you're not sure what to say, I'm just kind of reiterating what Donn said, but I think there's this huge value in being honest, in admitting and saying, you know what? I am really sorry. I am not sure what to say right now. And that's okay. Because we're often presented with situations where we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. But I think being honest and being authentic with the person is one of the kindest things that you can do. Because you know what? Maybe they don't even know what to say. They don't even know how to react to the token phrases that you're supposed to say, or that are things that often are said in those situations. So I guess this is a reminder to me in those uncomfortable moments where you're like, oh, I had a friend who's now going through this thing and I really want to help them, expressing to them, yeah, I care about you. And I want to listen. I'm just not sure what to do. And I'm not sure what to say in this situation. But I want you to know, that I care. I want you to know that, maybe, and it can sound token and trite. And you're like, you're not alone. I'm a friend. I'm here. I've got your back, or whatever it is. And sometimes those things that you say could potentially upset them even more. So sometimes just admitting to them that, this is a situation where I'm not sure what to do, but I'm here if you need me. And I think that honesty can go a really long way. It goes back to what we talked about in the first reflection, is the incredible power of somebody not feeling alone. That at least there's someone, even if they don't understand exactly what that person's going through, that they understand that there's someone else there and they're listening as well. And that's it for my reflections. I want to thank you for listening. I hope that you got some value out of this conversation with Donn, with the reflections, with the podcast in general. If so, I'd love to hear what you're thinking about, what you're reflecting on as you're listening to this podcast. You can leave comments on starkreflections.ca and over on YouTube, wherever you listen to this podcast. It does really help me, I guess, appreciate the fact that I'm not alone, that I'm not just blah, blah, blahing into a microphone and putting it out into the void. And I know that there are people there, because I meet folks all the time who say, hey, I listened to this episode, or I really enjoyed when you talked to so-and-so about this topic. It was such a great thing. So I know that there's lots of you out there, but again, it's always great to get your reflections, because remember, your reflections are probably something that someone else is going to go, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Or, oh, wow, me too. So thank you for listening. Another thing you can do if you enjoy these episodes is to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That can help other people. Or speaking of helping other people, if you enjoyed this podcast, you can say, oh, wow, Mark had this great guest, Donn King, on, and you guys should really listen to the episode 473. And yeah, skip his personal update. Just get right to the interview, like whatever. Because if that can help someone, that's going to be a great thing for you, for them, and of course, for myself, and for Donn. So thank you for that. And again, also a huge thank you to my patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as my coffee buddies at buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie. Really appreciate and love you guys for your support. But thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next week and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you, as always, great writing and good stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.